The quiet in the house was the first thing I noticed. It was a heavy, thick kind of quiet, not peaceful, empty. I was sitting on the floor, because the furniture was gone, all of it. The movers had taken the last of it an hour ago. The echo of my own breathing was the only sound. It started with a handshake. That's the part that gets me. A handshake with Ben Wed. Built the agency from a single client we met at a coffee shop into a firm with 20 employees. We had our names on the door, his and mine, for 15 years. I never thought to check the fine print. I was the ideas, the client face. He was the numbers, the operations. I trusted him with everything. Him the 20. He bagged my few items and handed me the change. It was a couple of dollars, some coins. My entire life was built on a digital foundation. My business contacts were in a cloud address book. My savings were tracked in a budgeting app. My professional reputation was a series of 5-star reviews on a freelancing platform. My entire identity, my livelihood, was a collection of usernames and passwords. And one day they were just gone. A targeted hack, a coordinated attack from a former partner who knew exactly where I was vulnerable. They drained the accounts, locked me out of every service, filed false reports that got my profiles banned. It was a digital scorched earth campaign. I went from being a successful, connected professional to a ghost in the machine. I had no platform, no audience, no email list, nothing, just this burning, furious idea in my head, and a hunger that felt like a physical ache. But in that nothingness, I found a strange kind of freedom, anonymity. There was no past reputation to live up to, no expectations to meet. I wasn't the guy who'd been wiped out. I was no one. And being no one online is a powerful place to start. You can build from the ground up exactly the way you want with no baggage. So that's what I decided to do. I would build an empire from scratch, not with bricks and mortar, but with bits and bytes. The first thing I needed was a new set of tools. I had a basic laptop and a shaky internet connection from a coffee shop. That was my headquarters. I spent days, weeks, just consuming information. I lived on YouTube. I learned the basics of web design from a soft-spoken guy in India who explained HTML and CSS like he was talking to a friend. I mastered the fundamentals of digital marketing from a woman who broke down Facebook ads into simple, logical steps. I devoured free courses on copywriting, on search engine optimization, on building an email list from zero. I joined online forums and communities, not to promote anything, but just to listen, to learn the language, to understand what people struggled with, what they needed. I was a digital sponge. Every skill I needed to build this new thing was available for free right there, for anyone with the patience to look. The online world is the greatest library ever constructed, and most people just use it to watch cat videos. I saw it for what it was, an arsenal. Then came the most important decision, choosing my ground. Where would I plant my flag? I couldn't be everywhere at once. I needed one primary channel. I looked at TikTok, at Instagram, at starting a blog. But I settled on YouTube. It felt more substantial. It rewarded deep, valuable content. It was a platform where you could build real authority. So I created a channel. The name was simple, descriptive. The branding was clean, professional. I had no face to show, no past to reference, so I used a simple logo. The content was everything. I started creating videos that solved a very specific problem for a very specific group of people. I didn't try to appeal to everyone. I spoke directly to my tribe. I gave away everything I knew for free. I held nothing back. The first videos got maybe 10 views. Most of them were probably me. But I kept going. I published a new video every single week. Without fail, the content was the foundation. It was the only thing I had. It was my product. Before I had a product, it was my sales pitch. Before I could sell anything, slowly a few comments started to trickle in, people saying thank you, people asking questions. That was the beginning of the audience, a handful of people who trusted me because I had helped them for free. The first dollar I made online felt like a miracle. It wasn't from some complex scheme. It was simple. I had built up a small but loyal audience, a few hundred people who watched every video. In one video, I mentioned a software tool I used every day. I explained how it worked, how it saved me time. I was genuinely just trying to be helpful. I included an affiliate link in the description, almost as an afterthought. A week later, I got an email, a sale, a commission of $37. I walked out of that store into the parking lot, and I just stopped. I stood there under the gray sky, holding this plastic bag with my pathetic groceries, and I looked at the change in my hand. A few crumpled dollar bills, some quarters, and something in me just broke, but not into smaller pieces. It broke open. A wave of heat went through me. It wasn't despair anymore, it was pure undiluted anger, a defiance. This is where I end standing in a grocery store parking lot with two. Must have read that email a dozen times. Someone somewhere in the world had trusted my recommendation enough to buy something based on my word. That trust was more valuable than the money. But the money proved it was possible. I had turned knowledge into value, into currency, all through a digital pipeline. That was the spark. Now I needed a system. I built a sales funnel. It started with the free YouTube content at the end of each video. I'd offer something else for free, a checklist, a guide, a more detailed tutorial in exchange for an email address. That was the gateway. The email list became my most valuable asset. It was my territory, my land. No algorithm could take it away from me. I started sending emails every day, not sales pitches, but more value, more help. I built the relationship then. And only then I would softly introduce my own product. It was a digital course packaged up from the very tutorials I'd been giving away for free. The first time I sent that email, my heart was pounding. I was terrified, but people bought it. Because I had already given them so much, asking for something in return felt fair. The system was working. The funnel was turning viewers into subscribers, subscribers into leads, and leads into customers. It was automated. It worked while I slept. Then came the scaling. I started reinvesting the money back into the business. I ran small targeted ads to my YouTube videos, attracting more of the right kind of people. I hired a virtual assistant from another country to handle customer service emails. I used project management software to coordinate with a freelance designer to make the brand look more professional. I automated the delivery of the digital product, so the second someone paid, they got immediate access. The empire was starting to run itself. It was no longer just me and my laptop. It was a system, a digital machine. The growth stopped being linear and became exponential. More audience led to more trust, which led to more sales, which allowed for more advertising, which brought in a larger audience. It was a virtuous cycle. The moment I truly understood the scale of it was when I received an email with a timestamp that showed it was sent at 3 a.m. my time. The sender was in Australia. They had bought the course and had a question. It hit me. Then my business was open right now. As I slept, it was serving customers on the other side of the planet. There were no borders, no time zones. The empire had no physical territory. It existed everywhere and nowhere at once. I was sitting in the same coffee shop, but my reach was global. That's the digital legacy. I built an asset that works 24 hours a day, 7 days a week from anywhere in the world. It provides an income, but more than that, it provides ultimate freedom. I am not tied to a location. I am not dependent on a single client or a physical storefront. The entire thing is built on a foundation of value I created and distributed through the internet. The lesson is so clear to me now. In the past, empires were built by conquering land, by controlling resources, by physical force. That's a game of scarcity. The digital age is a game of abundance. The most valuable empires today aren't built with bricks. They're built with bits and bytes. They're built with ideas, with trust, with valuable content. They took everything from me, all the digital dependencies I thought were my strength. But they left me with the only thing that really matters, the ability to learn, to create, and to connect. And that was enough to build everything back bigger than before. The silence after they left was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. It was a hollow, aching kind of quiet that filled every room of the house. The phone didn't ring, the text messages. They just stopped. Those people I thought were my friends, my support system, they vanished like smoke. The moment the money was gone, and the legal notices started arriving, it was like I had developed a contagious disease, and everyone was terrified of catching it. So I was just alone, staring at the walls, the dust gathering on the furniture that wasn't repossessed, and the mountain of problems that felt entirely mine to solve. It was a crushing weight. This isolation, I felt like I was carrying it all on my own, and my shoulders were breaking. Dollars to my name. No, that's not my story. Ben took the money, he took the business, he took my reputation. But he doesn't get to take my future. That's still mine. I drifted online, not looking for anything in particular, just a distraction from the quiet. I stumbled into this little corner of the internet, a forum for people who had lost their businesses. It wasn't glamorous, the design was dated. But the stories, they were my story, the shock of the downfall, the betrayal, the sheer panic of starting over with nothing but debt and doubt. I started reading. And for the first time, I didn't feel like a freak, I felt seen. I typed out a hesitant post, my fingers trembling. just outlining the bare bones of my collapse. The replies started coming in not with pity, but with a fierce shared understanding. "I've been there, this happened to me too, what are you thinking of doing next?" It was a lifeline. Then I found a local meetup group, through that forum, walking into that coffee shop. The first time my heart was pounding, I saw a dozen faces, all marked with the same kind of weary resilience. We didn't have solutions that day, but we had coffee and a shared language of failure, and that was everything. That was the moment the paradigm shifted for me. It was no longer about my lonely, desperate struggle. It was about our collective comeback. The power wasn't in going it alone. It was in locking arms with people who understood the terrain. I made a decision in those early days. I had nothing left to sell, so the only currency I had was whatever knowledge was left in my head. I started sharing everything. I wrote long, detailed posts on the forum about the specific mistakes I'd made in my previous company, marketing blunders, the hiring missteps, the financial blind spots. I didn't hold anything back. When someone posted a question about negotiating with creditors, I spent an hour drafting a step-by-step guide based on my own painful experience. I'd see someone mention they were struggling with a business plan, and I'd offer to look it over, offering concrete feedback. I introduced people to each other, connecting a web designer with a marketing strategist, a coder with a product developer. I did it without any expectation of getting something back. It was just giving. It felt like the only honest thing I could do. And through that giving, something amazing happened. I started building real relationships. Would have video calls, not to pitch each other, but just to talk, to listen to each other's fears and small victories. I learned about their families, their dreams, the specific textures of their struggles. I was listening, truly listening, to what they needed, what they were trying to build, what was holding them back. And in doing that, I stopped seeing them as potential customers or contacts. They became my tribe, my counsel. And their collective pain points, their shared frustrations, became the most valuable focus group I could ever imagine. I started sketching out ideas for a new service, and I'd throw them out to the group. "What do you think of this? Would this have helped you when you were starting?" The feedback was brutal, honest, and pure gold. They were shaping the idea with me. When I finally had something tangible to offer, a simple service built from all that shared wisdom, the launch wasn't a grand event. It was quiet. I just told my story to the community. I said, based on everything we've all been through, I've built this. I think it can help. And the response, it wasn't a sales surge. It was an embrace. The first 10 customers were people from the forum, from the meetup group. They weren't buying a product, they were investing in a person, in a shared mission. They believed in. They became my first clients, my first testimonials, my most vocal champions. And then something even more powerful happened. They started talking about me, about what I was building, to their own networks. It was a genuine, organic word-of-mouth wave. They'd say, "You have to talk to this person. They actually get it." The growth wasn't forced or expensive. It felt natural, like a current. We were all riding together. And as the workload grew, I didn't look to a recruitment agency. I looked around the virtual room at the people were most engaged, who were always there, offering support and sharp insights. I hired my first employee from the community, a brilliant woman who had been one of the most active members of our forum. She already knew the mission, she believed in it deeply, and she understood our clients on a fundamental level because she had been one. The question shifted in my head. It wasn't, "Why did this happen to me?" anymore. It became, "What am I going to do about it?" And the answer was simple: I am going to build something he can't touch, something that is entirely, completely mine. Watch me. What we built in the end wasn't just a successful company, it was an empire of belonging. The service we provided was important, but it was almost secondary. The real product, the thing people were truly buying, was a sense of connection and purpose. They weren't just clients, they were members. They were part of the story. We had created a place where people who had felt isolated and broken could come together and feel strong. The business and the community became this self-sustaining ecosystem. The community fueled the business with ideas, loyalty, and new members, and the business in turn provided a platform, resources, and a reason for the community to gather and thrive. It was a virtuous cycle, a feedback loop of mutual support. And I realized that this was the ultimate asset. You can have a great product, you can have capital, but those can be copied, they can be taken away. What can't be easily replicated is a culture, a shared identity, an empire defended not by walls or patents, but by the fierce, unbreakable loyalty of its people. They took everything from me, but in doing so, they forced me to discover the one thing that was truly unshakable: the power of building something together. The noise in that conference room was deafening, all these voices, all these experts telling me exactly what I had to do, the recipe for success. It was laid out so clearly, so confidently. You secure venture capital. You scale fast, you burn through cash to capture market share. You build a brand with slick, expensive advertising, you follow the playbook. And I followed every single step. I was the perfect student. And it bled me dry, it left me with nothing but a mountain of debt and a product that nobody actually wanted. I remember sitting on the floor of my empty office after the bankruptcy. The silence was heavier than all the noise that came before. And I just started asking, why do we do it that way? Is it because it works, or is it just because it's the only way anyone has ever talked about? I tore everything down to the studs. First principles. What is a business at its absolute core? It's not about scaling or capturing markets. It's a simple, brutal exchange. You create something that another person finds so valuable they willingly give you their money for it. Everything else is just decoration. The entire industry was obsessed with the decoration. The logos, the funding rounds, the office perks. I became obsessed with the core, the value. And that's when the radical idea hit me. It was so simple and so insane. What if I built something that a very, very small number of people found indispensable, not something that millions of people thought was kinda okay, but something that a handful of people would consider a secret weapon? A tool they couldn't imagine living without. Everyone told me it was a terrible idea. You can't build an empire on a handful of customers. That's not how it works. But I was done with how it worked. I wanted to see what would happen if I tried something that seemed impossible. So I started doing the exact opposite of what everyone else was doing. My competitors were spending fortunes on Google ads, fighting each other for clicks that cost more and more. So I decided I wouldn't spend a single dollar on advertising, not one. They were all racing to scale, to onboard as many users as possible, as quickly as possible. So I decided my product would be invitation-only. You couldn't even buy it, you had to be referred by an existing customer. They were building generic tools to appeal. I went back to the empty apartment. I sat on the floor with my back against the wall. I didn't have a desk. I didn't have a computer. I had a pen and a pad of paper. And I started writing. I wrote down every single thing that had gone wrong with the old business, the reliance on a partner, the lack of oversight, the bloated overhead, the vague service offering. We were trying to be everything to everyone. I wrote down what I was good at, really good at, not managing people, not schmoozing clients, the work to the broadest possible audience. So I decided to build something so specific, so niche, that it would be useless to 999 of the population. This anti-strategy meant we were completely obscure for a long time, and that was the greatest gift. There was no spotlight on us, no pressure to hit quarterly growth targets. We were invisible. That invisibility gave us the freedom to experiment, to break things, to have conversations with the few customers we had. And actually listen. I mean really listen. We'd get on a call for 2 hours, just talking about one tiny frustrating part of their workflow. That kind of attention is impossible when you're chasing 10,000 new signups a month. We made mistakes, sure, but we made them in private, and we learned from them fast. The constraints were my best teacher. Having no money forced a kind of creativity. I never knew I had. You stop thinking about what's possible and start thinking about what's essential. What is the absolute minimum we need to do to deliver that core value? It makes you ruthless. It strips away all the vanity. I'll give you a specific example. Early on, we had a feature request from 3 different customers. It was a big, complicated thing to build. The conventional wisdom would be to build it to please the customers. But I looked at it through this new weird lens. Was this feature part of our core value? Was it something that would make our product indispensable? Or was it just a nice-to-have, something that would add complexity? I realized it was a distraction, so I did something that felt like business suicide. I told those 3 customers we weren't going to build it. I explained why. I said our focus was on perfecting the foundational experience, not on adding bells and whistles. 2 of them left. And I thought, well, that's it. But the 3rd one, he emailed me back. He said, I've never had a company tell me no before. I respect that it tells me you have a vision. He became our most vocal advocate. That was a weird win, saying no to a customer and earning more loyalty because of it. Another time, a big blog wrote about us. It was a huge opportunity. They wanted to do a feature. Conventional wisdom says you drop everything, you give them a demo, you provide all the assets. I did the opposite. I thanked them for their interest, but said we weren't doing any press at the moment. I told them We were focused on serving our existing community, the writer was baffled. But that act of refusal of not chasing the spotlight created an aura. It made people curious. What was this company that didn't want publicity? The refusal itself became a stronger signal than any feature article could have been. We started getting more inquiries from people who were genuinely intrigued, not just because they read a fluff piece. I consistently doing the opposite. We weren't just building a product, we were building a brand identity. We weren't better than our competitors, we were different. And that difference attracted a certain kind of person, a person who was tired of the same old corporate, speak the same empty promises. They weren't just buying software, they were buying into a philosophy. They felt like they were part of a secret club. The loyalty was ferocious. They defended us online, they referred their friends, they gave us feedback. That was pure gold, because they were invested in our success. And that niching down, we took it to an extreme. We didn't just build project management software. We built project management software, specifically for independent architectural firms that specialized in sustainable design. It was an incredibly tiny market. But in that tiny market, we became the undisputed leader. There was no competition. Because no one else was crazy enough to focus on something so specific. We understood their workflow, their jargon, their problems better than they did we. Strategy, the big idea. I was a craftsman who had gotten lost being a CEO. Could build features for them that would be completely meaningless to anyone else. But for them, it was magic. That extreme specificity was our moat. You can't compete with a giant if you're playing in their giant stadium. But if you build your own tiny, perfect stadium in a corner, nobody else is looking at you. Rule it completely. This empire, what it is now, it's not a monument to optimization, it's proof of concept for a completely different way of thinking. The legacy isn't the revenue or the company valuation. It's the blueprint. It's the demonstration that success often lies in rewriting the rules, not in following them more efficiently. The world is saturated with people, all following the same recipe, fighting for the same scraps. The real power, the real freedom, comes from having the courage to question the recipe itself, to ask if the ingredients are even right, to build something that doesn't look like anything that came before it, and in doing so, to create a space that is entirely your own. That's the new philosophy, not bigger, faster, louder, but smaller, deeper, truer. It's about finding the few people who need exactly what you have to offer, and serving them so well that they wouldn't dream of going anywhere else. That's how you build something that lasts. That's how you build an empire from nothing. They took everything from me, at least that's what I would have screamed at the sky. The house, the car, the bank accounts, the reputation. It was all gone, swept away in a legal and personal hurricane. And in the immediate deafening silence that followed, I felt nothing, a complete and total void. It wasn't grief, not yet. It was a strange, hollow emptiness. And in that emptiness, I found the most perverse gift imaginable, the gift of oblivion. You spend your whole life building a certain structure. You follow the blueprint society gives you, you acquire the symbols, you maintain the facade. And the maintenance is a full-time job, polishing the silver. You never use, worrying about the property taxes on a home that's too big, fretting over the quarterly reports that measure a success. You don't even feel anymore it's a gilded cage, but you're the one who built it bolt by bolt. And then in one fell swoop the cage is demolished, and you're just standing there naked in the rubble, but you're standing and you can finally see the sky. That was the liberation, the freedom of having nothing left to lose. There were no more expectations to meet, no more appearances to keep up. The race was over. And I hadn't just lost, it'd been disqualified. And the relief was astronomical. It was the moment I saw the matrix. I saw the entire framework of chasing success for its own sake. And I saw how flimsy it was a collective hallucination. And I was finally awake. The question that came to me, then in the cold light of that awakening, wasn't how do I get it all back? It was far more profound and far more terrifying. If not this, then what is a life actually, for what is truly worth building? When the noise of acquisition stops, what sound does a meaningful existence make? That question became the foundation, not a business plan, not a market analysis, a philosophical question. And the empire I built was the answer. I had to redefine wealth from the ground up. Because the old definition had been proven false. It was a lie that collapsed under its own weight. So what is wealth truly? I decided it is autonomy, pure and simple, the freedom of your own time, the freedom to choose your location, to wake up and decide what you will do with your hours, the freedom to say no. My new empire wasn't measured by its market capitalization, But by the blank spaces on my calendar, $1 billion in the bank is worthless if you're a prisoner to the processes that earned it. And I realized the niche was right there in the wreckage small businesses owners like I had been guys with a dream and a lot of passion, but no idea how to tell their story. They couldn't afford a big agency. They needed someone who understood the pressure, the risk, someone who would be a partner, not a vendor. I would build a consultancy for the underdog. Because I was the ultimate underdog. I had nothing left to lose. That was my freedom, the freedom to try anything, because there was no farther to fall. Wealth is also impact, a different kind of metric. It's seeing a problem your customer has and solving it so elegantly that you actually improve their day. It's creating a workplace where people feel respected, where they grow, where they can build their own version of autonomy. It's knowing that the machinery you've created generates a positive ripple effect in your community. That's a balance sheet that matters, and perhaps most importantly, wealth is peace. It's the ability to sit in a quiet room with a quiet mind and feel no anxiety about the phone ringing. It's having a body that feels strong and capable, not worn down from stress. It's having a handful of relationships that are deep and real, built on shared values, not transactional convenience. That is the ultimate currency. Everything else is just a tool to protect and cultivate that peace. This new empire then became something more than a company. It became an expression of self, the most personal form of art. Every decision, from the product design to the customer service policy, was a reflection of a core value I had discovered in the ruins. It was a manifesto written in code and commerce. It was my answer to the question of meaning. I was building a thing that could only have been built by me, with my specific scars and my hard-won insights. There was no separation anymore between life and work. The line vanished, because the work wasn't something I did to afford a life. The work was the expression of the life I wanted to live. It was play, it was purpose. It was all integrated into a single flowing current. And that current has a cyclical nature. The empire generates resources, yes, but those resources aren't an end point. They are a means to pour back into the world, to fund an idea that has no commercial value, but immense human value, to support an employee through a personal crisis, to invest in a young person with a spark in their eyes. The giving isn't charity. It's the final crucial step in the cycle. It completes the circuit. It takes the energy generated by the system and feeds it back in creating more light, more growth. It's the opposite of hoarding. Hoarding is fear. Giving is a statement of faith in the ongoing process of creation. Which brings me to the final truth, the reflection I had years later, looking out over an empire that was so different from the one I lost. I realized that they didn't take everything from me. They took what was unnecessary. They took the clutter. They took the heavy, ornate furniture of a life I wasn't really living. And in taking it all, they made room. They forced me to clear the land, so I could see the bedrock beneath. They made room for what was essential. The loss was the necessary demolition. It was brutal, and it felt like death, but it was the only way the new construction could begin. The empire itself, this thing I built from scratch, is secondary. It's impressive on paper, I suppose. But the true victory, the only victory that matters, was the journey. It was the reckoning. It was the reclamation of my own soul. I had to lose the world to find myself. The empire is just the artifact of that discovery, the proof that it happened. It could vanish tomorrow, and I would still have the only thing that truly matters, the understanding of what I am and what I am here to do. So this is my invitation to you. Don't wait for the hurricane. Don't wait for them to take everything. Ask yourself the question now, while the music is still playing and the lights are still bright. What are you building your life upon? Is it someone else's blueprint? Are you maintaining a cage because you're afraid of the empty sky? Examine the foundations. Is it strong? Is it true? Does it lead to autonomy, impact, and peace? Or is it just stuff? The question of meaning is the most important work you will ever do, and it's my first action was that pad of paper. I wrote a business plan, not a fancy one, just a list of what I would do, who I would help, and how I would charge. Then I made a list: 10 local businesses I admired. I went to the library and used their computer to research them. I wrote down their names, their current marketing, what I thought they were missing. Then I went home and used my wife's old laptop to write 10 personalized emails, not sales pitches, letters. I told them I was starting a new chapter. Best to choose that work yourself before circumstance chooses it for you. Mentioned my own failure. I made it a strength. I said I understood the stakes better than anyone. I offered 1 hour of free no-strings attached consultation, just a conversation. I sent all 10 emails. I got 9 rejections or nor please. But one guy wrote back. His name was Mark. He owned a small chain of hardware stores. He said my email was the only one that didn't sound like a copy-paste job. He said, come in tomorrow, let's talk. The lawsuit wasn't even from a client, it was from a vendor, a printing company we'd used for years. They were suing for non-payment. I brought it to Ben laughing, almost a simple mistake. He got very quiet. He said he'd handle it. A week later I was served with another, then another. Our line of credit was frozen. Paychecks started to bounce. The grind started the next day. I met with Mark. I gave him my best thinking for free. For 2 hours, we whiteboarded ideas for his business. At the end, he looked at me and said, okay, how much to make this happen? That was my first client, my first $1,000. It felt like a million. I worked out of that empty apartment. My office was a corner of the living room with a folding chair and a card table. I took every job that came my way. I didn't care how small. A $500 project to write a website for a local bakery. I treated it like it was $1 million campaign. I worked until 2-3 in the morning. I survived on coffee and that same cheap pasta. I didn't take a day off for a year. Every minute was invested back into the business. A better laptop, a professional website, a business phone line. And I failed constantly. I pitched a client and completely misread the room. I underquoted a project and ended up working for pennies an hour. I tried a new marketing tactic that landed with a thud. But each time I didn't see it as a failure. It was data. That pitch failed because I was still sounding too much like a big agency. Data point, be more personal. That project was underquoted because I didn't account for revisions. Data point, build clearer boundaries into the contract. That marketing tactic didn't work. Data point, try a different one. Every setback just refine the model. It made the blueprint sharper, more resilient. The first major success was a number in a bank account. It was a phone call. Mark, the hardware store owner, referred me to a friend of his who owned a regional food distribution company. That client led to another and another. My name started to get around, not as the guy who failed, but as the guy who got results, the guy you called when you needed honest, hard-hitting strategy. I hit a revenue milestone that allowed me to pay off the last of the personal debt from the old business. I remember transferring the final payment. It was like shedding 100-pound weight. The empire solidified when I stopped being a one-man show. I hired my first employee, a young, hungry graphic designer who reminded me of myself. I was terrified taking on that responsibility again. But it was different this time. I built the systems. The transparency was absolute. I taught her everything I knew then. I hired a project manager, then another strategist. We moved out of my apartment and into a small office, a real office with a door that had my name on it, just my name. We became known for a specific thing, turning around struggling small to mid-sized businesses. Our brand was resilience. Now looking back, I see it all with a cold clarity. That fire, that total devastation, it was necessary. It burned away everything that wasn't essential. The ego, the pretense, the fragile identity tied to things. It left behind only the core, the hard, unbreakable core of who I really was and what I was actually capable of. Ben didn't build this empire. I did, with these 2 hands, starting from less than nothing. He took everything I had, but he gave me the one thing I needed most, the motivation to build. The day I finally forced the issue, when I marched into his office and demanded to see the books, his face changed. It wasn't the Ben I knew. It was a stranger, calm, cold. He slid a folder across the desk. He had been siphoning funds for years, not just skimming. He had taken out loans in the company's name, loans I had personally guaranteed without even realizing it, and he had funneled every dollar into a separate account. The business was a hollowed-out shell, and I was on the hook for all of it. Something truly my own. The phoenix doesn't rise in spite of the fire, it rises because of it. The ashes are its foundation, and this empire, every brick of it, is forged in those ashes. They took everything from me, and when I say everything, I don't just mean the money, the house, the cars. Anyone can lose those things. Insurance can replace a car, you can earn back money. No, they took something far more valuable. They took the story I told myself every single morning when I looked in the mirror. They took the character I played in the world, the successful one, the one who had it all figured out, the one people looked to, asked for advice. That person was deleted, erased, and what was left standing there was just a shell, a hollowed-out silence. I remember the first morning, after it was all gone, waking up in a rented room that smelled like stale air and someone else's life. There was no schedule to follow, no meetings, no calls to return. The phone wasn't ringing. It was just quiet, a terrifying, heavy quiet. And in that quiet, the only question that echoed was, who am I now without the business cards, without the title, without the respect, without the financial statements that proved I was somebody who is left? It was the most disorienting feeling, like the ground had not just disappeared from under my feet, but the entire concept of gravity had been revoked. I was floating in a void, untethered from any identity I recognized. My ego was a shattered mirror on the floor. I'd walk down the street and see my reflection in a shop window, and not recognize the man staring back. He looked smaller, invisible, almost. I'd pass a coffee shop, where I used to hold court, and I'd feel a physical pain, a craving for that old validation. I realized my self-worth had been built on the flimsiest of foundations. It was a house of cards, and the whole thing had collapsed. The persona I'd spent decades building was just a costume, and now it had been ripped off, leaving me naked and shivering in the cold. The loss of status was a deeper, more personal wound than the loss of any asset. It was a death, the death of the person I thought I was. That void, that emptiness, it was terrifying. At first it felt like failure, like I was nothing. But after a while the panic subsided, and the silence became something else. It became space, empty space, and I started to understand that, before I could build anything new out there in the world, I had to first clean up the wreckage in here, inside my own head. I had to go through a kind of mental detox. I started with the beliefs. I had to dig them up, like pulling out rotten roots. I'd sit for hours with a notebook and just write down every thought that came up. I am only valuable if I am producing money is the ultimate scorecard. Rest is for the weak. Asking for help is admitting failure. These weren't just thoughts, they were the invisible architecture of my old life. They were the commands that had been running in the background, driving me to build a castle on sand. I had to see them for what they were: limiting, fragile lies. The dominoes fell so fast, the partnership dissolved, the business was seized by creditors, my assets were frozen. The house we'd bought when our daughter was born, with the big backyard where she learned to ride her bike, went into foreclosure. The bank took it, the cars were repossessed. I remember watching the tow truck take my car away from the curb. I was standing on the sidewalk, in a t-shirt, feeling like everyone on the street was watching. Reprogramming my mind felt like learning a new language. I had to consciously adopt a growth mindset. It was a daily, hourly practice. When I'd feel that old shame rise up, that voice saying you're a failure, I had to stop and talk back to it. I'd say, no, this is not an ending, this is a blank slate. This is the ultimate creative opportunity. It felt fake at first, like I was lying to myself. But I kept at it. I started meditating, not to achieve some Zen state, but just to learn how to sit with the discomfort without running away. I'd journal every morning, not about what I was going to do, but about who I wanted to become. I was building mental muscle, resilience, the ability to withstand the pressure of starting from zero without collapsing back into the old stories of inadequacy. And slowly, a new foundation began to form, but this time it wasn't built on sand, it was built on bedrock. I had to ask myself the hardest, most simple questions. What actually matters to me? Not what looks good, not what impresses people, but what truly deeply matters. I spent days thinking about it, and the answers that came up were quiet but solid: integrity, being the same person in private as I am in public; service, creating something that genuinely helps people, that makes a tangible difference in their lives; creativity, the joy of building something from an idea; freedom, not just financial freedom, but freedom of time, freedom of mind. This became the new blueprint, my core values. They weren't ambitious in the old sense of the word. They were profound. They were my compass. Every decision, no matter how small, had to be measured against them. Does this action align with integrity? Does this move me toward true freedom? This alignment became everything. It was the difference between building a house and building a home. One is just a structure, the other is a sanctuary. Crafting a new vision for my life was the next step, but this vision wasn't about a target net worth or a specific job title. It was about a feeling, a state of being. I envisioned a future self who was calm, centered, unshakable, a man whose sense of security came from within, not from his bank account, a man who didn't need the applause to feel worthy. That vision became my magnet. It pulled me forward on the days when the work felt insignificant, when the progress was microscopic. I was no longer building an empire for the world to see. I was building a man I could respect. And that's when the real work began, the external rebuilding. But it felt completely different this time. It wasn't a frantic scramble to get back to where I was. It was a deliberate conscious process of bringing the internal world into manifestation. Every small action, from sending a single email to learning a new skill, was infused with this new sense of purpose. It was no longer about proving something, it was about expressing something, expressing this new, more solid identity. The hustle. Different quality, it was focused. But it was peaceful, there was no desperation in it, because my worth wasn't on the line. With every outcome I was building from a place of wholeness, not from a place of lack. Empire that began to rise from the ashes looked nothing like the one I had before. It was smaller at first, more niche. But it was real, it was built on genuine relationships, on delivering real value, on a product. I was truly proud of the success started to flow. But it felt different, it didn't feel like a validation of my ego anymore. It felt like a natural consequence of alignment, like a river finding its course. The money that came back was just a resource, a tool, it wasn't the score. The material stuff, as crushing as it was, wasn't the real rock bottom. The rock bottom was the silence. The phone stopped ringing, the emails dried up, friends from the industry, guys I'd had drinks with for a decade, they stopped returning my calls. I'd see their names pop up on my screen, and my heart would leap. But it was just a news alert or a spam call. They didn't know what to say, or they thought failure was contagious. My wife, she tried to be strong, but I saw the fear in her eyes every time she looked at me. The real wealth was in the freedom I had created, the freedom to choose my projects, to control my time, to work with people I genuinely liked and respected. The wealth was in the peace of mind I felt at the end of the day, the deep, unshakable knowledge that I was living in congruence with my values. And that's the ultimate victory. It's not the business, it's not the financial statements. Those are just the shadows cast by the real structure. The real empire is the self, the unshakable self, the man who knows who he is with or without the external trappings, the man who was forged in the fire of total loss. They took everything from me. And in doing so, they gave me the greatest gift possible. They forced me to strip away all the false identities, the fragile ego structures, the dependency on external validation. They forced me to start from scratch, and from that absolute zero, I had to build something that couldn't be taken away, something that no market crash, no betrayal, no failure could ever touch. I built an empire of the self, and that is the only empire that truly matters. They took everything, the house, the car, the savings account, they drained. They left me with a folding chair in an empty apartment, and a silence so loud it was deafening. But in that silence, I started to think, and thinking for me became a weapon. The first thing I did was an audit, not an emotional one. I didn't have time for that. This was a tactical, ruthless inventory of the ruins. I sat on that folding chair with a notepad, and I listed every single asset I had left, not assets in the traditional sense. I had no money, I listed skills. I was good with numbers, I understood how to structure a deal. I had a contact list, not of friends, but of people who respected my work, or at least my former position. I had time in overwhelming amount of empty time, and I had rage, a cold, focused, burning rage. I listed that too. I quantified it as my primary fuel source. And I analyzed the failure. I didn't look at it as a victim, I looked at it like an engineer studying a collapsed bridge. What were the points of failure? Where was the structural weakness in my case? It was over-reliance on a single income stream. It was assets that were illiquid, tied up in property that could be seized. It was a network built on perceived status, not genuine value. I reverse engineered the entire collapse. I identified every weakness, every single one, and I made a vow: my new system would have none of them. It would be anti-fragile, it would get stronger under attack. And that's when I saw it, the opportunity gap. When you're living comfortably, you see the world through a filter, you don't see the cracks where the light gets in. But when you're on the floor, you see the world from the ground up. You see all the little problems that the big companies ignore, because the problems are too small, too niche, not worth their time. I spotted one, a specific frustrating process in an industry I knew that was handled with outdated, clunky software. The established players were too busy selling enterprise-level solutions to care about the small guys, but there were thousands of small guys, and they were all frustrated. That was my opening, an unmet need, invisible from the top, glaringly obvious from the bottom. She married was gone, replaced by this hollowed-out ghost who sat on the floor of an empty apartment. That's when I realized my biggest advantage: I had nothing, and having nothing is an unfair advantage. If you know how to use it, I had no legacy costs, no office lease, no payroll, no expensive software subscriptions. From 5 years ago, that I was locked into, I was a blank slate. That meant I could be radical, I could innovate at a speed that would make a large company's head spin. They had committees and budget approvals, I had a laptop and a decision. I adopted guerrilla tactics marketing. I didn't have a budget for ads, so I went directly to the source. I found online forums, where these small business owners gathered. I didn't advertise, I answered questions. I provided genuine free value. I became a known entity, a helpful expert, when I finally mentioned I was building a simple, affordable tool to solve this exact problem. The interest was already there. Sales, I didn't have a fancy CRM. I used a spreadsheet. I personally emailed every single person who signed up for a trial. I asked them what they needed. I built the product with them, not for them. Operations, I used free tools. For as long as humanly possible, I automated everything that could be automated. My overhead was practically zero. And I leveraged my story, but not as a sob story. I framed it as a strength. My branding was raw and authentic. They took everything from me, so I built this from scratch. That narrative resonated. It wasn't a corporate mission statement. It was a human story. It created instant trust. People knew I wasn't some faceless corporation. I was someone who had been knocked down and was building something honest. That story became my most valuable asset. It was marketing you can't buy. The architecture of the empire was crucial. I chose the vehicle carefully. It had to be a digital product, high margins. Because once it's built, duplicating it costs almost nothing. It had to be scalable, able to handle 10 customers or 10,000, without me having to personally serve each one. And it had to have low startup costs. A SaaS model, software as a service, was perfect. A monthly subscription, predictable revenue. I embraced the bootstrap philosophy with a religious fervor. Profitability was the only goal from day one, not growth for growth's sake, not vanity metrics like user signups, cash flow. I reinvested every single dollar back into the business. I didn't take a salary for a year. I lived on the absolute minimum. I avoided debt like the plague. Debt was a chain, and I was never wearing chains again. This discipline meant I owned 100% of the company. There were no investors to answer to, no board to persuade. I was the sole architect. Then I systematized everything. I created a replicable process for every single task. Onboarding a new customer, I wrote a script. Then I recorded a video. Then I built an automated email sequence handling a support question. I built a knowledge base with articles answering the most common queries. Marketing, I documented exactly where I found my most engaged users and created a template for engaging there. This wasn't just about efficiency. This was about building a machine that could run without me. I was building a system, not just a job for myself. The inflection point came about 18 months in. I remember the moment I was looking at the analytics dashboard. New customers were signing up automatically. The payment system was charging credit cards, and depositing money into the account. Support tickets were being handled by the automated systems I'd built, with only the complex ones coming to me. The machine was working. It was generating momentum on its own. The results became predictable. I could forecast revenue. I could see the growth curve. The shame was a physical weight. It sat on my chest, making it hard to breathe. I'd lie awake at night and just list everything. I'd lost the house, the car, the business, the respect, my identity. Who are you when you're not the successful entrepreneur anymore? When you're just a man with a negative net worth and a family to support? I had nowhere to go, no one to turn to. I had burned through every favor, every bit of goodwill, just trying to keep the sinking ship afloat for a few more weeks. I was no longer a desperate scramble. It was a steady upward climb. That's when I started diversifying. The initial SaaS business was throwing off cash. It was a reliable engine. I used that cash flow to fund adjacent businesses. I didn't gamble it. I looked for opportunities that were logical extensions of what I already knew. I started a small consulting arm for larger clients who needed custom work. I created a digital product, a course, teaching others the specific niche skill my software automated. I built a small portfolio of assets. Each one was a separate stream, but they all fed into each other. The consulting leads bought the software. The software users were leads for the course. It was an ecosystem, an empire. The goal was never just to be rich again. The goal was to build something resilient, something that could withstand a storm. Because I know what a storm feels like. So the architecture is built around adaptability. If one stream dries up, the others support it. The systems are designed to be reconfigured. The entire operation is lean, agile, and built on a foundation of pure value creation. There is no bloat, there is no arrogance. They took everything from me, but they left me with the one thing they couldn't take: the ability to think, to plan, to build. They gave me the gift of desperation. And I used that gift. I built an empire not on sand, but on the lessons learned from the collapse. It's not a fortress designed to keep people out, it's an engine designed to create value, to withstand pressure, and to empower its architect. The legacy isn't the money, the legacy is the blueprint itself, a system that turns scarcity into strength and a story of loss into a foundation that cannot be taken away again. The alarm doesn't just go off, it's a violation, a shrieking tear in the fabric of the only 2 hours of sleep I managed to scrape together. It's 407 a.m. The room is pitch black and freezing. I am on a couch, not even my couch, a friend's couch, a lumpy stained thing that smells like old dogs and regret. My back is a single solid knot of pain. I swing my legs out from under the thin blanket, and my feet hit a floor littered with clothes and notebooks. This is it. This is the palace I rule from. A corner of a living room in a part of town where the sirens never stop. The first thing I do is look at my phone, not for messages, there aren't any. I look at the photo I have set as the lock screen. It's a document, the one that handed everything I'd built over to them. Their signatures are right there, smug and final. I read it every morning. It's my version of a prayer. It's the thing that makes the cold floor feel like a starting line and not a finish line. The bathroom is down a hall I have to tiptoe through. I can't wake my friend. I can't impose any more than I already am. The fluorescent light in there flickers on, and my reflection in the mirror is a ghost, pale, hollowed. I splash water on my face, the cold jolting me awake. There's no time for a shower, there's just time to get moving. Utterly alone. By 4:30 I am out the door. The city is quiet in a different way, now not peaceful, just exhausted. The air is sharp and bites at my lungs. I walk the 12 blocks to the all-night diner. It's the only place open, an island of greasy light in the dark. I don't go in, I can't afford to. I sit on the bench at the bus stop across the street. This is my office. Until the library opens, I connect to their weak Wi-Fi, and I get to work. My laptop is old, the battery barely holds a charge, so I have to work fast. This is the first shift of the day, the building shift, before I go to the job that actually pays for ramen noodles and the bus fare. For 2 hours, I work, I code, I answer emails from the other side of the world, people who have no idea I am sitting on a bus bench. Shivering, I sketch out designs on a notepad. This is the empire right here in the glow of the screen. While the city sleeps, it's fragile, it's nothing, but it's mine. The sun starts to come up, a dirty orange glow behind the buildings. I pack up and walk another 10 blocks to the warehouse, my day job, lifting boxes, stacking pallets. It's mindless, backbreaking work. My body aches. Within an hour, the guys I work with, they're a good people. They talk about the game last night, their kids, what they're doing this weekend. They ask me to join them for a beer after shift. I always say no. Every time. The first few times they ribbed me about it, called me antisocial. Now they just don't ask anymore. I see the way they look at me, a kind of pity, like I am a lost cause. They don't understand that the beer, the hour at the bar, that's a luxury I can't afford. That hour is the difference between staying in this warehouse and getting out. Lunch break is 20 minutes. I sit in the corner and eat the same thing I eat every day, a granola bar and an apple. I pull out my phone and I go over the morning's work. I make notes for tonight. My mind is never here. It's always on the next thing, the next step. The foreman yells, and we're back at it. My hands are raw, my shoulders burn. But the physical pain is a distraction from the other kind. The kind that comes from knowing I had an office with a view. Once I had a team, I had a life. They took all of that. They took the furniture, the company name, the bank accounts. They took my reputation and twisted it into something ugly. But they couldn't take this grind, this stubborn refusal to stay down. The shift ends at 3 p.m. I am drenched in sweat and grime. I don't go home, I go to the public library. It's a different kind of quiet, the smell of old books and floor wax. I find a carol in the back, away from everyone. This is the second shift, the learning shift. For 3 hours, I study. I'm teaching myself everything they said. I didn't know advanced coding languages, market analysis. I read books on business strategy written by people who've never had to start from a bus bench. I take pages of notes. My hand cramps, my eyes sting from staring at the screen. But I don't stop. The rage is a physical thing in my chest. A hot coal, it's the fuel. Every time I feel my focus waver, I think of their faces. I think of the meeting where they sat across from me all smiles. While they pulled the rug out, that memory is like a shot of adrenaline. It wakes me up better than any coffee. At 6 p.m., the library closes. I walk back to the apartment. My friend is there making dinner. He offers me some. It smells amazing, real food. I tell him I already ate. It's a lie. I go to my corner of the couch, put on headphones, and get back to work. The third shift, the building shift. Part 2. This is when I execute what I learned in the afternoon. This is when I code for real. I lose track of time. The world outside the headphones disappears. It's just me and the problem I am trying to. The turning point was a Tuesday. I was at the grocery store, buying the cheapest things I could find: pasta, canned beans. I had a $20 bill in my pocket. And that was it. That was everything. At the checkout, my card was declined. I knew it would be. Id known. But Id hoped. The kid at the register, he couldn't have been more than 19. He gave me a look. Not mean, just impatient. You got another card? I fumbled, patting my pockets. The people in line behind me were sighing. I could feel their eyes on my back. I handed. Solve. The loneliness is a physical weight during these hours. It's a Friday night. I can hear my friend watching a movie, laughing. I see pictures on social media of people I used to know. They're at a party, they're on a vacation. They're living a life that feels like a distant dream, a life I had. For a second the doubt creeps in. Is this worth it? This isolation, this constant grinding pain? Am I just a fool punishing myself for a failure? And then I get a notification, a tiny thing, an email. Someone from the other side of the country has signed up for the beta test of my software. It's a single person, a stranger. But in that moment, it's everything. It's a signal, a tiny pinprick of light in all this darkness. It's proof that the path is working, that all this sacrifice isn't for nothing. I lean back into the couch, and I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. That's the victory, not a big check, not a headline, just one person saying, "Yeah, I am interested." I work until my eyes won't focus anymore, until the words on the screen blur into nonsense. It's past midnight. The apartment is silent now. My friend has gone to bed. I finally eat something, a bowl of cereal standing in the dark kitchen. It's not enough, but it's something. I collapse back onto the couch. The day is over. My body is a wreck. Every muscle screams. My mind is buzzing, still racing with ideas. I set the alarm for 407 a.m. again. And as I am lying there in the silence, I realize something. I am not here because I have to be. Not anymore. I am here because I choose to be. This grind, this relentless, brutal schedule. It's not a punishment, it's the price, it's the raw material. This is what an empire is built from, not from a lucky break, not from a brilliant idea, but from thousands of moments like this one: moments of choosing the work over sleep, choosing the dream over a beer, choosing the long, hard, lonely path, because the alternative is giving up, and accepting this as my life is a million times worse. The breakthrough didn't come as a lightning bolt, it came as a slow dawn. It was a Tuesday. I was at the library. Same as always, an email popped up. It was from a name I recognized, a big name. They'd seen the beta, they wanted to talk. The meeting was a video call. I took it from the same bus bench, my heart hammering in my chest. They made an offer. It was a fortune. But it was validation. It was a foot in the door. It was the moment the compound interest of all those 4 a.m. mornings finally paid off. The money came later, the office came later, the team came later. But the habits, they never left. I still wake up early. I still have that photo on my phone. The difference is now I own the couch, I own the apartment. The empire is built, it's solid. But its foundation, its core, is still that relentless grind. It's the memory of the cold bus bench, and the library carol, and the aching muscles. That's the engine, and I never ever let it shut off. They took everything from me, and I mean everything. It wasn't a fire or a bank robbery. It was quieter than that, more complete. It happened through a screen.